Hi, it's Dot from dot2trot.com. And one of the biggest challenges I had when I was going from my regular eating, low fat foods to a low carb, high fat diet was, what do I do for snacks? My typical snack when I was really heavy was fruit. So apples, maybe a banana or two, strawberries, whatever it was. But fruit was always my go-to snack. It was just, I love fruit. They were tasty, it was sweet. But what I didn't realize was the fructose in the fruit was making me fatter and fatter and fatter. So once I switched over to a low-fat diet, the question came, what do I do for snacks? And it's actually quite easy with a low-carb diet, which surprised me, and it's quite tasty. And so I thought would be good with the Super Bowl coming up in just a few days. What type of low-fat snacks would you want? Low-carb snacks would you want to eat? Whether you're hosting a party or going to a party, because that's the other challenge, is when you're going out to a friend's house, what exactly could you eat? What could you bring over that would be tasty for everybody else, but that you could also just sort of snack and munch on and keep to your style of diet? And what I thought today, we'd go over 3 little things that you can make that are very low in carbs, but great amount of fat and just tasty. And I'm going to show you a couple things I make. One is an Antipasto platter, some guacamole, which you can always use as dip, and that's always a good thing, and also some chips, a good replacement for potato chips, using pepperoni of all things. I'm going to have a part 2 follow-up to show you a few more snacks along with the ones I'm making today. But for right now, we're going to get going. What I'm going to start with is the Antipasto platter. So I'm going to clear off my little workspace and get everything all set up and ready to go. All right, I started plating my Antipasto platter. I'm not making a big serving for a party. This is going to be mine and my husband's dinner for tonight. And trust me, you think, well, it's a snack, why would you have it for dinner? It's more than enough to cover dinner for us, and there's a reason why. Let me give you an idea, first of all, what I'm using for the platter. I'm using olives, green olives. They are great on a low-carb diet because they're very, very fatty. I'm using fresh mozzarella cheese. Again, nice fat content in there, and fat is what fills you up, fat and protein. I've got my cucumbers here, and what I'm using cucumbers for is they're doubling up for crackers. So whatever type of dips or anything you have, I'm just using a spicy mustard for a dip. You can certainly put cheese on this, you can put your meats on it, but it just becomes a delivery device. And it also, because it's a cucumber, it has a nice fresh feeling to it from all the heavy foods that you're going to get. And then the other things I have is peppercini peppers, and adds a nice little spice to the meal. And then I've got 2 salamis here. I got a regular old salami that I cut up, and then I have a salami which is pronounced soppressata. I really practiced that because I wasn't quite sure how to pronounce it, but it's an Italian salami, and it's got a little bit more. You can see all the white in here, all the white that's in there. It's more of a fat content to it. So those are 2 of the meats I'm using. I'm also using 2 other meats, and one is called mortadella. You may not be as familiar with that one, but your grandparents and your great-grandparents probably are. This was the forerunner of bologna, and if you notice with it, if you can see this, it's got a lot of white spots in it. That's fat that's in the bologna. But it makes it for a wonderful, wonderful meat that you can have. And again, it's sort of become, I used to love bologna as a kid, but now that I had this is my favorite. Most of them come with either peppers built into it nowadays, and this one has some peppers in it as well as some nuts in it as well. So it just sort of depends on where you get it from, what butcher shop you go to. The other one I am using, as people are way more familiar with it these days, is prosciutto. And it's a ham. And pretty much what you're going to do, it's very thinly sliced. And what you're going to do, and I've left the paper on so I can divide them evenly. For these types, since it's very thin and they're more cold cut sort of style, I just fold these up. And you just put them on the platter the way you sort of want them. And it makes it easy for people to sort of just grab them and just sort of, have what they want to have. And, as you can see, it's a little bit big, one is bigger than the other. I just sort of stack them together, and so people can have what they want. And I'm going to use a couple of these. I'm going to use one that's a little bit nicer than the one that I ripped apart because it is paper thin, so I'm going to do that. But we'll go ahead and that won't go to waste. The thing about with a platter is my Achilles heel when it comes to food, since I'm not a chef, is the presentation. I'm not about pretty. I'm like, does it taste good? But, you know, with a platter, you can be as creative as you can be. You can use some nice herbs to make it look pretty if you'd like. Flowers, even if you would like to, it's really is up to you. It's sort of up to you as far as how you want it to look. Now I'm going to use one more slice of mortadella. This is actually the mortadella, a really nice thing about it is if you wrap goat cheese in it and fry it up, it makes a nice little ravioli piece. So anyway, so that sort of is my platter right there. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add a dressing on top. And all I'm going to do is just drizzle some olive oil on top. Just slightly drizzle it. So it makes it more like what we know a traditional antipasto salad. You use an olive oil based salad dressing. So I got that. I'm using sea salt here, just a little bit. Just a couple of pinches. And then a little bit of pepper. Now if you wanted to, you can certainly add oregano to it. That would be awesome. You could add a little bit of garlic if you wanted to, minced garlic maybe, and just sort of make a dressing. I didn't make a dressing because I'm using my olive oil for something else and I ran out, so I don't have that much. So I'm using it very sparingly. So I went ahead and dressed it. Like I said, I'm using a spicy mustard in the middle. The other piece I'm adding to this, I'm just not putting on the platter, are macadamia nuts. And macadamia nuts are amazingly healthy. They are expensive. In our area, for a pound, they're probably about 17 bucks. So I don't get a whole lot at one time, but we eat them, so I know they're not going to waste. So in a way, that sort of is a good, you know, I'm willing to pay for it. But macadamia nuts are the best, one of the best nuts you can have. They're very high in fat. They're very dense. You have to be careful with nuts because it's very easy just to start popping them in nonstop and you don't feel like you're getting full. But they are very high in fat, very healthy fats that are in them, and they just taste wonderful. I snuck one because my husband will eat them all if I don't. But anyway, other good nuts on a low-carb diet that makes sense are almonds, are very healthy for you, walnuts, pecans, Brazil nuts, hazelnuts, wonderful fat to protein ratio that you've got there, and you're not very high in carbs at all. But this dish, eating this will fill both of us up because we have more fat on this plate than we do protein or carbs. The ratio, I would say, well, I do have a lot of meat here, more than I normally would. I'm just showing you what it would look like. Probably if it was, if I was doing, I would say the fat to protein content here is really good. It's something that will fill you up fairly quickly. So you want to go slow. This is really a dish that you nibble at. So this is an Antipasto platter. I'll have the recipe up online so you'll see what it is to make for 12 people. What I'm going to do now is get to my next snacking dish, which is pepperoni chips, which is really cool, and I'll be right back with that. Oops. When you're looking at the plate, as you'll see, there's one little ingredient I completely forgot, and I roasted this ingredient just for this plate. I got an orange pepper and I roasted it, and I added that to it. Again, it adds a nice little contrasting flavor. It helps really refreshen your palate. You got all these different flavors going, and it's just always nice to have more vegetable too. Although you don't want to overwhelm with vegetables since that's your carb. But anyway, I just, did a little bit of a roasted pepper. They taste amazing. They're delicious. I decided to use orange, and it's just a nice way to liven up the plate. All right, I made my antipasto platter, and now I'm moving on to the second snack. But what I'm going to make is chips, which are out of pepperoni. Now, this is what a pepperoni chip is made. I made a first batch already. That's what it looks like. And this is what it looks like before it goes in the oven. You can see it's a lot more flexible, a little bit bigger. That's how much they shrink down because the fat that they use. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and line my pan. Now my pan, I'm just going to line them so that they got some space, breathing room, even though they shrink, that's fine. And what you're going to do, the oven is preheated to 375. You're going to cook them initially from 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how hot your oven really is. Mine only lasted about 5 minutes, which was fine. And then what you're going to do once you do that much time, you take them out of the oven. I'm going to pat them down with a paper towel to get up the excess grease. And then I'm going to flip them over and put them back in the oven for about another 2 to 4 minutes. Sometimes what I find is that it's never an exact science because it depends on how well or how thinly cut your butcher cuts them, or if you buy the little pepperoni in a bag that you can get to make pizzas, you can use those, and those tend to cook a little bit longer. I don't know if it's because of all the preservatives they have in them or not, but I tend to buy the stuff without any preservatives or nitrates in them. So it's what you can find. Use what you can. But again, it's going to go in at 375 for about 5 to 8 minutes initially. Take them out, pat off the extra grease with a paper towel, flip all the pepperonis, make sure you give them space. They do stick together if you don't do that. And then cook them for about another 2 to 4 minutes after that. Just watch them like a hawk. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in, and we'll go ahead and see what they look like when they come out. Hopefully, they'll be just like this guy. Crunchy. All right, my pepperoni is out. I am patting dry the little remaining that there is. And I got most of the excess oil up. And as you can see, I've made a chip. What you want to do, again, when you want to watch these like a hawk, sometimes these don't have it. It took me a couple of times to trial and error. I'd get these dark rings around the edges. And, you know, oh, that looks fine. And then when you taste it, it tastes a little burnt to you. Well, because you burnt them. You know, I burnt them, not you, but I did. So you want to watch them like a hawk. So you want to make sure it's when you want these crispy, you want them crispy, but not to the point where it's going to taste like charcoal. You don't want that. So, you know, you just play with it. Now, if it's a little burnt, you know, there's no problem with that. You can just go ahead and still use them. They're still tasty. The nice thing about these chips is that you can use them with a piece of cheese on them. You can dip them to an extent, but you don't want to over dip because you can easily break them. Actually, like a potato chip. What I'm going to do right now is show you how to make some really quick low-carb avocado, or I should say guacamole. Guacamole is pretty much a very easy dish to make. I got 2 avocados. I've already gone ahead and removed the pits. So they're just sitting right here. I've got some chopped cilantro. I have a lime here. I have 1 clove of garlic. I have about 2 tablespoons of onion, or healthy tablespoons of onion there. I also have something in here which is, you don't have to add this, but I'm going to add it because of a dish that I'm making in a couple of weeks, and a guacamole is going to be a big part of it, is I have some 2 chipotle peppers in sauce that I'm going to be adding to my guacamole. It adds a nice smoky flavor to it, which is quite lovely. But what I'm going to do first, right off the bat, since I have my avocado already sort of, you can see a half avocado right there, I'm going to go ahead and take a fork and just start mashing it. You want to just break it apart. You don't want the big hunking pieces. So I'm going to do that right now and just really work it with my fork. I will say, one thing you have to keep in mind when you make these is how creamy or chunky you want your avocado. That's a big part of this. If you like it chunky, then you need to leave some chunks in here when you're smashing them up. Okay, my avocado is all wonderfully set. It is a bit chunky, which is the way I like it. What I'm going to do is go ahead and add my onions. I'm using red onions. You can also use scallions. They work really well with this dish as well. But I'm using about 2 tablespoons of red onions. I'm going to put this off my chopping board. I have a piece of garlic, and I got my garlic press. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mince the garlic right on in here. And the thing is with the garlic press is it tends to stick a little bit, so you just scrape it off. But the nice thing about it is it gets the juice in there as well. So it doesn't overdo it. Now for my cilantro, I'm leaving some of the stems on. These are washed, and what I'm going to do is just start cutting it. There we go. So I got this on. It's okay if there's stems on here. You can eat the stems. The stems are healthy. I trimmed off about, maybe about 5 to 6 inches of the stems that were originally on here. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and add these in. Normally, I would say it's about half a cup. I do a little bit more, but I love the taste of cilantro, and so it doesn't really do a whole lot of adding additional carbs if you add more cilantro. One of the key ingredients, though, is this puppy. It's the lime. And what you want is juice of half the lime. That's where I start with. And so what I'm going to do to make sure I get the max amount of juice, and I'm going to roll my lime and press on the lime as I roll it. Basically, I'm loosening it up. I'm making sure the pulp is going to deliver a maximum amount of juice. Once you start rolling it, you really loosen it up a bit. So I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to get my trusty juicer out. I'm going to put half the lime in it. I'm going to go ahead and squeeze. And you have to sort of tilt it a little bit to get all the lime out. They don't tell you that. It has holes in it. And they'll make you think, oh, everything comes out. It doesn't. The other thing is sometimes it squirts you in the eye. And that ain't pretty. So I'm going to go ahead now and stir everything together. All right, right now I got everything stirred together, but I'm going to add a little bit of sea salt. I'm just going to do a pinch or two of sea salt. And then a little bit of pepper. And stir it up. You want to do a little bit of salt at a time, and that's really with any dish, because you add too much, you can't take it back. Too little is always the way to start. And you can always add a little bit more, and just keep in mind, especially for something like this, since this is for, if you're hosting a party, or you're bringing the guacamole to a Super Bowl party or whatever you're doing, you don't want to add too much guacamole, because if you do, or I should say, not guacamole, salt. If you do, there are people in there who may just cringe at it. You never want to do that. So I'm going to get out a spoon, and I'm going to sample to see if I need to add a little bit more salt, or even lime juice. That's the other key. This is really, really good. I'm going to add a little bit of salt, though. There we go. Mix up, but it tastes delicious. So what I'm going to do now, I'm not going to add my chipotle peppers yet, because I'm using this for 2 dishes. So I'm going to let this sit in the fridge for about an hour or so, and then I'm going to divide it. And then I'll just have straightforward guacamole, and then I'm also going to add my chipotle peppers to it for another dish that is going to sit in the fridge. That one's going to sit in the fridge about another day to let everything meld together. But it's a wonderful dip you can use. The nice thing about it, if you make a batch, which is what I tend to do, is I make a batch during the week. I use it on top of salads. I use it on top of omelets. I use it on top of meats. It doesn't matter. Guacamole is one of the healthiest dishes you can actually have. It's a great way to enhance a meal. It's also a great side dish if you're using, pepperoni chips or using vegetables instead of crackers. But it's a wonderful. I just can't say enough about guacamole. I just love it because I love avocados. It's one of my staples. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the fridge and let this chill out. And until then, I'll see you next time.